Harvard University, you may remember, Will, to the tune of what?
$2.2 billion.
$2.2 billion. They had their funding struck. And of course, now they've decided we demand our funding. And we are going to be suing the Trump administration. And the Trump administration is fighting back, but also saying, hey, we may hold out another billion, which again, let's just get back to that reality that there are up to $9 billion of taxpayer funding going to Harvard University. Harvard, of course, is saying, hey, we deserve it. It doesn't matter if we're violating what you're saying. This is essentially contractual. You have to give us this funding. But let's just start with the obvious facts, which is we are funding these elite universities that are training people in ways that a lot of the American people do not like, to the tune of billions, to the tune of nearly $10 billion for just this one institute, which means a lot of the others that you are familiar with are also getting similar treatment. Again, billions of dollars. And we know also that their endowment is, Will, what was it,
$53 billion.
And as you said, that is more than some countries' GDP.
That's right. Yeah, when you talk about how large the endowment, this is the wealthiest university in the world, but it has an endowment that is larger than the GDP of dozens of countries: Estonia, Iceland, Botswana, Georgia, Jamaica, Armenia, Mongolia, North Macedonia, Moldova. I mean, you go on and on. You realize that there are countries that their annual product of the entire nation is smaller than the endowment of Harvard.
Yes,
but yet Harvard is saying you can't take away the funding you give us. That's unconstitutional.
And then we find out it's upwards of $9 billion that's currently going to Harvard. And I think that's as egregious as this lawsuit is to find out. And I think this is why you had Doge and Elon Musk and those kind of people involved, because when we find out where government spending is going to this extreme. Now, I assume we all knew that there was probably some federal funding going to most universities. Most public and private universities receive some sort of public funding. I got no problem with that. It doesn't necessarily bother me. But when you start hearing that B word, that billions and billions, is where you go, okay, I think we probably can be using this a little bit better. Have you walked around your city? Have you seen the homeless crisis that's happening all over the world and are all over the country? Maybe that could help out. Some of those billions could help that out. I think they probably could.
Right. And I think there's so many layers to this story because, once again, you talk about when you start to realize how much of our taxpayer dollars are going to so many places. And it's not just like this is government aid to help this problem here or to help this nation here that many fight over whether, those things are beneficial or help the national interest. But when you're talking about the most wealthy university in the world, the largest endowment, the storied history of Harvard, the elite University of America. I mean, it is a brand in and of itself. And you're thinking about this and you're like, they're getting that much in grants, that they are a private university. And now they're crying foul saying you can't take away government money because that violates our First Amendment rights. That violates academic freedom. This is illegal for you to do this. And so they sue to make sure that the taxpayer dollars keep going to their university through these grants. But you break this down about, one, there's the issue of the protecting of Jewish students on campus, having it be a place where people can learn and be safe and not have anti-Semitism rampant and taking over Harvard Yard like we saw just last year. But you start to think about this and you're like, man, I work very hard in my life. I work 40 hours a week. A lot of you work more than 40 hours a week. And you are diligent. You provide for your family. You pay your taxes. You're a good, patriotic American. And where does this money go? Going to the most elite, most wealthy university is receiving billions and billions of your dollars that you work hard for, where the average salary of a professor there is over $150,000. That this is where your taxpayer money is going. And they're saying, you can't take that from us. You can't take this government funding away, and we're going to sue you to make sure you don't. But Harvard's actually being very clever here. They're trying to get a coalition of other universities to kind of stand with them on this academic freedom platform. They've hired Robert Hur as one of the attorneys to defend them in this lawsuit. You're like, where do I know that name? That name sounds familiar. That was the special counsel that kind of unraveled the facade that many people saw in President Biden when his report came out and said, I can't try him because he's not fit to stand trial, essentially. So that name is very familiar within conservative circles because he was at the top of the news. Now he's in private practice. He's no longer the special counsel. And that's who Harvard hires to defend them in this lawsuit. So they're doing this very smart because they, at the end of the day, want to keep this taxpayer funding. But it shows so many different layers of how entrenched these private universities are to the government checkbook.
Yeah. They also want you to hear from our president, from Donald Trump, who spoke about this just a couple weeks ago. This happened again. This is President Donald Trump. Take a listen.
I think Harvard's a disgrace. I think what they did was a disgrace. They're obviously anti-Semitic, and all of a sudden they're starting to behave. But when you see what they were saying, what they were doing, when you see the way they took care of events, when you watch that woman, that horrendous president that ruined the image of Harvard, maybe permanently, in Congress, in the halls of Congress, when you take a look at what happened there, it was horrific.
Professor Hutchinson, one of the things that we've brought up with this billions and billions that are going to Harvard, and they're suing saying, hey, we deserve it. It's our money. It's our grant money. There may be some validity to the agreement, and this could cause some trouble for the Trump administration when they jump into these kind of topics head first without thinking about, they may be thinking about the ramifications, but they know that their audience, if you want to say the American people, wants results quickly. And that's not necessarily the best way to get a victory, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And in fact, the rules are designed to impede quick action by the president. And so one of the things that the Trump administration needs to do is to be aware of these rules and to think proactively about when and how to attack these institutions who have engaged in anti-Semitic activity. And one of the things that the Trump administration, I think, needs to do is to comply with the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, most of our audience is not going to be excited about the Administrative Procedures Act. But as a lawyer, you have to comply with those rules, and the failure to comply with those rules means that the Trump administration will be tripped up in court because the judges love those rules.
The government alleges that because of them not protecting the students on campus, that they are violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So that's the government's partially their claim for being able to take this funding away. And Harvard's using that against the government by saying that, well, if we're violating this, and remember, Harvard actually lost at the Supreme Court just a year or so back because their admissions process was discriminatory as ruled by the Supreme Court. So this wouldn't be a novel idea that Harvard is doing something discriminatory. But in that Civil Rights Act, the Title VI, there are provisions of how you then start to remove funding, take this away because of this civil rights violation. And what Harvard is arguing is not necessarily against the claim of Title VI violation, but saying that if you're going to use this, you have to do it the proper way. There's a time period. There's a time to engage the party to try and get them to no longer discriminate, as it were. And that's where it goes, the Administrative Procedures Act. And that brings up a larger question, too, about has the regulatory state and the bureaucratic state made it so difficult for the government to do anything to change because of how much these procedures get put in place, how long it can take to actually see real change. And it actually gives plaintiffs like Harvard in this situation a real opportunity to stop the Trump administration from carrying out this funding freeze?
I think your analysis is spot on. So essentially what the federal government has done is it's set up a number of procedures which do what? The procedures entrench the existing policy. And so what Harvard has also done, skillfully with the help of good lawyers, is that they are using the law against the federal government. And so if I were to fault the Trump administration, I would fault them for not thinking proactively. What is Harvard likely to do? So what the Trump administration should have done is comply with those procedures first. Anticipate that Harvard would bring a suit. And where did Harvard bring its lawsuit? In Massachusetts. That is a favorable jurisdiction. And what the Trump administration should have done is that they should have set up a crisis team that would go through each and every procedure ahead of time before announcing a public campaign against Harvard and these other universities. Harvard has huge resources. Many of these resources have been given to them by the taxpayers. And now Harvard is using its wealth against the American people. And I think the Trump administration should have anticipated that.
We are so excited to announce the ACLJ's brand new app, completely redesigned to provide you with the best tools available to partner with us at the ACLJ. You can watch the daily Secular program, sign the petitions, customize your ACLJ membership experience, donate with the click of a button, and receive up-to-the-minute critical updates that the mainstream media can't censor. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to your phone's app store, search ACLJ, and click install. It's that simple.